Hello, Mikhail Viktorovich.
Hello.
Today I propose to talk about music as a part of culture, about subcultures, and as a basis of our meeting, I decided to take a letter from Georgy Sviridov, which was published in the Pravda newspaper in 1958. This is a resonant letter that left no one indifferent. Not the people, not the creative intelligentsia, not the party nomenclatura. Rumor has it that Sviridov wrote this letter on orders from above. But I doubt that Georgy Vasilievich could cooperate with the party nomenclatura in such a format. And before I ask you a question, I would like to quote a small fragment from the letter. Recently, popular music in our films is not encouraging. At one time, the mass audience with love and gratitude accepted a number of well-known film comedies with music by I. Dunayevsky and other composers. The best examples of Dunayevsky's music, like joyful, graceful, melodic, continue to beautify our everyday life, delighting listeners with brilliance, wit, and good taste. But unfortunately, these wonderful traditions, with rare exceptions, do not find a worthy continuation in new musical comedies. Our film directors began to get carried away with the cheap methods of Western review, with its outward beauty, pompous luxury, and inner emptiness. Instead of vibrant youth songs, singing pure and sincere feelings, such films are dominated by dubious musical products, imbued with tearful anguish and abandon. It is enough to name at least the films The Girl Without an Address, To the Black Sea, A Girl with a Guitar. The directors of these films, as well as the composers collaborating with them, clearly sought to please backward tastes. Here is my question for discussion. In your opinion, to whom do you think Georgy Vasilievich Sviridov addressed this letter? After all, the newspaper Pravda was issued in simply massive circulation.
Well, in general, such a letter really could not appear in Pravda simply on the initiative of Sviridov or because of the fact that the editor-in-chief missed it. Therefore, one should think that it is most likely that a certain political grouping in the leadership of the CPSU somehow politely asked. That is, it was not a direct decree, but someone apparently talked, said that there are problems that Sviridov is also well aware of. And there is an opportunity to publish this letter if he writes it. In general, such political technology was used in Soviet times, if not every day, then quite often, if we talk about some serious problems. Therefore, the letter was addressed to the general public, but, judging by subsequent events, it passed without consequences. Because Soviet music, it really did drastically change its character since the second half of the 50s, when Sviridov wrote this letter, and further. In general, there was really a lot of imitation of what was in the West. Well, this is, in general, the result of the fact that, with sensuality and the intellect among the composers, things were not very good. Therefore, it was easier to imitate than to create independently, based on their perception of the world.
But there was still some kind of reaction. Many even associate the fact that for 2 years, Mark Bernays was also silent with the letter. To all appearances, Sviridov, after all, reflected the opinion or views in general of some part of the creative intelligentsia about what is happening in culture.
Basically, I don't know why Mark Bernays fell silent. Because, if to speak about my opinion on the work of Mark Bernays, then this was one of the outstanding singers of the Soviet era, whose songs, whose performances were exceptionally soulful and touched many, many people.
Here is the following quote from Georgy Sviridov's letter. Good songs of all genres, heroic, lyrical, comic and satirical, deities and others, should be taken to the ideological armament of the Soviet people in the fight against that bad and vulgar that disfigures the taste of people and instills bad habits in them. You know, I once followed a discussion on one of the music forums about different preferences of musical styles, tastes, and so on, and someone dropped a phrase that when it comes to taste, there can be no arguing. That either there is a taste or there is no taste. And the discussion stopped for a day or two. No one else wrote anything on the essence of the matter. There arose such a non-determinist. I attribute this to the fact that probably one part likely did not want to show its bad taste, and the other did not want to flaunt its taste. How fair do you think this remark is?
I think that it is not fair, because practice shows that people deprived of taste, people deprived of a sense of style, it is they who are the ones who are unrestrained, and they give out their opinion categorically as undeniable and alternativeless. And where they say you can't argue about tastes, and that this statement caused silence for a while, this is the result, in my opinion, of the fact that those who defended their position close to Sviridov's position and analogues to it, they could not rationally object. To rationally object, for this it is necessary to go beyond musicology, because music and musicology is only one of the branches of human culture. If we talk about tastes, then you need to start from physics. From the point of view of physics, music is simply oscillations in the acoustic range. If we turn to such a branch of physics as the theory of oscillations, we will learn a lot of interesting things about resonances, about the fact that there can be some re-emitters when oscillations in one frequency range on some physical carriers cause oscillations as a response in another frequency range on other physical carriers. Well, in general, if we talk about all this, then music is a purely physical oscillatory impact on the organism of a person, in which there are some re-emitters, as a result of which there is an impact on the psyche of the personality. The second side of the question consists in the fact that physics, in its historically taken shape form, does not know informatics. Because if we after all consider creation as a living organism, then oscillations, the processes of emission of oscillations, these are processes transferers of meanings, some functionality of the structure of creation. Well, if we touch on the theme of functionality, then we inevitably come to the problematics of the development and degradation of material structures. And the effect of oscillations can be a factor that entails development and a factor that entails degradation. And this applies to everything in general, and a person too, because a person, both as an individual and as a cultural community with a certain peculiarity, and humanity as a whole, in general can go both along the path of development and the path of degradation. So when we come to the fact that there is development, there is also degradation, both development and degradation are intertwined in life, sometimes in a very bizarre way. It is precisely then that we can just shut the throats of those who say that there is no arguing about tastes. We can shut their throats for the simple reason that development and degradation, they proceed differently, and they have different results. If development takes place, then the genetically inherent potential for the development of some structure is realized. The structure goes through its entire genetically programmed life cycle. Either within this cycle or upon its completion, it enters some new quality of being. And as a result of degradation, the structure cannot master its genetic potential of development. And the laid-in-advance genetic resource ceases to exist. But these are the most general characteristics of development and degradation, which are also characteristic of man, both as an individual and for human society. Therefore, If we talk about the topic you can't argue about tastes and the impact of music, then music, being really the carrier of certain meanings, of a certain functionality, can, as a physical process, generate both degradation and development. And if we talk about culturology, then one of the tasks of culturologists is to identify omnifarious works of art that push to degradation or generate it, and take care of developing measures to protect society and, above all, the younger generations from these degradational processes. Because if we talk about how tastes are formed, how a sense of style is formed, then for a person these are not innate characteristics, because innate characteristics, in general, are a certain basic potential. Genetic settings of the organism, of the psyche, and further, on this basis, in general, the culture of the personality is built, including the personal culture of attitudes towards music, and the perception of musical works. In culturology, this topic is publicly closed. When we turn to non-public culturology, such things turn out that the Beatles are actually a project that was supervised by the special services and psychologists from the special services. And along with the fact that they do have very thoughtful works, for example, Let It Be, on the whole, Beatlemania gave rise to a massive dumbing down of the population in all the countries of the world. Well, and then rock music, which was given a start by Beatlemania, aggravated this process. And then, you see, it turns out that if a child has been listening to all this since childhood, then for him the classics are simply not understandable. Because the musical themes that unfold over the course of minutes, and sometimes tens of minutes, in classical works, they simply did not fit into his psyche, which is formatted with short drum kit rhythms. And the rhythmology of psychic activity, by all appearances, further extends to other areas of psychic activity. Articulate speech, thought processes and their expression in articulate speech, concentration as the ability to properly listen to other people. In general, there is a primitivization of consciousness.
So it turns out that after all, this is an element of education, in which the state should be interested and carry out its function precisely in education, in order to increase its, conditionally speaking, taste.
If we talk about the state, then if it is a people's state, then it is interested. But if it is elite corporate, it is interested in making dunderheads, because dunderheads are easier to manipulate.
By the way, here is the following quote from Sviridov in support of your words. However, not everyone is fully aware of the high social role of music in our modern life. Some comrades are convinced that the perception of the highest examples of music, symphonic operatic chamber music, is only the lot of the specially chosen, and that the common man, they say, can live without symphonies. Even from the lips of highly educated specialists, one can sometimes hear the frank confession, "I'm a layman in music." It would probably be a shame to say that I have not read Pushkin's Eugene Onegin or Tolstoy's War and Peace, but one can confess without blushing that one does not know Tchaikovsky's Sixth Symphony or Glinka's Ruslan and Ludmila. This is also about state education, what we talked about.
Yes, this is really so. And if from every direction there fly who knows what sounds, in essence meaningless noises, in the aspect of melodies, arrangements, rhythmics, on which simply idiotic words are superimposed, then society will experience big problems. But if there are some filters that don't let all this garbage through, and in general, everywhere there is normal music, then society will become different in a few decades. Well, somewhere on the internet I came across this. In supermarkets, when there are few people, they prefer to play slow classical music, because, in this case, customers stay longer in the store and buy something, which contributes to the growth of the supermarket's income. But when the supermarket is full of people, in order to increase its capacity, they play hard rhythmic music that people try to avoid. So they quickly buy what they need and duck out of the supermarket, making room for others. Along with this, there were publications on the internet that the Americans were experimenting. People were given to listen to the music of various composers and asked if they liked the music or not. But in the process of listening to musical works, the biocurrents of the brain were recorded. And it turned out that if a person says, "I like it," then, as a rule, there was one type of biocurrent. If he says, "I don't like it," another type. That is, the statistics, like, dislike, and the statistics of the character of biocurrents, they in some way turned out to be interconnected and corresponding to each other. But there was one composer who fell out of both statistics. This was Johann Sebastian Bach. Regardless of what people said, "I like it, don't like it," the type of brain biocurrents was the same, like. This is an indication that music is indeed a factor of impact, and the result of the impact is objectively programmed by the music itself, although it does not always reach the level of human consciousness, especially if the sense of style, taste, is distorted by culture. Therefore, Bach is objectively, physiologically beneficial. But not everyone understands this.
The next quote from Sviridov, I think, will lead us to another question. The question of the filter that you mentioned. In these mass yieldings to bad taste, a business-like commercial spirit is expressed, with which, unfortunately, some creative workers, composers, film workers, authors of texts are also infected. The time has come, as Mayakovsky said, to take up a broom and sweep out of our art the rotten products of all union magician, hack worker. Here, in my opinion, the key term is hack worker. So, after all, one can substantiate this meteorologically, to put, as you say, a filter. That is, censorship as a structure should, as it seems to me, be approached precisely from the point of view of professionalism to music, seeing as we are talking about this now.
Here is a problem of a different kind. There is no one to carry out censorship. In the old days, Chuchev worked in censorship. You see, it was Chuchev, a man of most broad erudition, with great literary taste, an outstanding person. Therefore, censorship performed by Chuchev, this is one thing. And censorship performed by an untaught idiot, this is another thing. So the question of censorship, it is precisely such a question.
Well, yes, it is still part of the state apparatus. It is a structure, it is a bureaucratic mechanism. And I, of course, agree that there is a very thin line between protecting society from the influence of bad taste and degradation and giving a creative person, and they are, let's say, special people, give him a certain freedom of creativity so that he can say something that may even be different or incomprehensible, but still say it. Some kind of border like this, a line, after all, needs to be drawn in the state and from the point of view of precisely hack work or not hack work. After all, there are still a lot of even critical remarks from both film directors and writers that you're moving away from the canon, you're moving away from certain methods, you're moving away from the genre, from stylistics, that if you insert into the frame, for example, a smoking girl, then she must correspond to some set of artistic imagery, some artistic techniques, be part of an artistic technique. And in my opinion, there is precisely such an approach to censorship, precise as professionalism. A lot of such hack work, which is elevated to the rank of art, can immediately be cut off.
Может сразу очень много вот такой вот халтуры, которая возводится в ранг искусства, может отсечь.
Here we come to another theme. Culture is an informational algorithmic system. In such a quality, Culture can be considered in two aspects. Culture as an instrument for governing the self-organization of social life, and culture as an object of programming society to achieve certain objectives within the framework of solving certain tasks. If the latter takes place, then culture becomes an anonymizer of governance, because the subjects who programmed culture, who set tasks of programming, they remain behind the screen of culture. And given the performance speed of culture as an instrument of governance, they, at times, reside in the distant past. A person who grew up in this culture, he perceives it as an objective given, such as air, weather, and does not ponder about how and by whom it was designed, for what tasks. Plus, there are also cultic prejudices on the theme, this is conspiracy theory, a worldwide conspiracy, this is for idiots. Yes, the worldwide conspiracy is to shepherd idiots and reproduce them in the continuity of generations. But if the culture is purpose consonant, then this means that different cultures can differ in the set of objectives, ways and means of achieving them. And if we talk about a set of objectives, ways and means to achieve them, then the conception of governance is like a hierarchically ordered set of objectives, ways and means to achieve them. Accordingly, all cultures are conceptually conditioned. Therefore, a masterpiece created in the stream of one culture can be a destroyer in relation to another culture. But if it is destructive in relation to another culture, then this again leads us to the theme of development and degradation. So, the culture in relation to which it is destructive, what is it like? Does it work for the development of man or for the degradation of man? And accordingly, a masterpiece that works for degradation is a bad masterpiece. But that doesn't stop it from being a masterpiece, because its impact surpasses that of all others. And if culture works for development, and it produces some kind of masterpiece, then it stops degradation.
There was such a phrase, you probably remember it well, maybe you even know where it springs from, that today he plays jazz and tomorrow he sells out his homeland.
Yes, there was such a phrase. In general, there was a certain correct observation behind it.
Moreover, Georgy Sviridov, judging by the reviews and memoirs of his contemporaries, he was a very erudite man, and he knew jazz. He knew all American, that is, representatives of black music. He even worked at one time as a taper. That is, the man, after all, understood.
Сам даже работал в свое время топером, то есть человек все-таки понимал.
So with us, Yuri Vladimirovich Andropov was also an admirer of jazz. And this leads to the question, what about it? Was he above jazz, or was he under jazz?
Remember, there was such a program, Musical Ring, where in the late 80s, even in the early 90s, rock musicians were given the freedom to show themselves, present their music, their creativity. And I remember after or during the performance of the group Aquarium, someone asked, "What are you thinking about?" That is, the audience in the television studio was divided into two conditional parts. One understood what he was singing about, although no one said so in concrete detail, and the other part said that it was just a collection of phrases. That is, this is again about the theme of perception, about the psyche. That is, how our algorithmics works, how much it differs when we perceive the same information, but from completely different algorithmics of perception and processing.
Yes, this is true. If we talk about European culture, then the topic we are discussing is touched upon by Herman Hesse in the Glass Bead Game. He has this in it. We might quote many other sayings by the ancient writers, but we shall cite here only a few passages from the chapter on music in Buwei's Spring and Autumn. The origins of music lie far back in the past. Music arises from measure and is rooted in the great oneness. The great oneness begets the two poles. The two poles beget the power of darkness and of light. When the world is at peace, when all things are tranquil, and all men obey their superiors in all their courses, then music can be perfected. When desires and passions do not turn into wrongful paths, music can be perfected. Perfect music has its cause. It arises from equilibrium. Equilibrium arises from righteousness, and righteousness arises from the meaning of the cosmos. Therefore, one can speak about music only with a man who has perceived the meaning of the cosmos. Music is founded on the harmony between heaven and earth, on the concord of obscurity and brightness. Decaying states and men ripe for doom do not, of course, lack music either, but their music is not serene. Therefore, the more tempestuous the music, the more doleful are the people, the more imperiled the country, the more the sovereign declines. In this way, the essence of music is lost. What all sacred sovereigns have loved in music was its serenity. The tyrants Jia and Zhou Xin made tempestuous music. They thought loud sounds beautiful and massed effects interesting. They strove for new and rare tonal effects, for notes which no ear had ever heard hitherto. They sought to surpass each other and overstepped all bounds. The cause of the degeneration of the true state was its invention of magic music. Such music is indeed tempestuous enough, but in truth it has departed from the essence of music. Because it has departed from the essence of real music, this music is not serene. If music is not serene, the people grumble and life is deranged. All this arises from mistaking the nature of music and seeking only tempestuous tonal effects. Therefore, the music of a well-ordered age is calm and cheerful, and so is its government. The music of a restive age is excited and fierce, and its government is perverted. The music of a decaying state is sentimental and sad, and its government is imperiled. This is an ancient translated text. Moreover, the text is not European. But what is it about? It is about the fact that light and dark, the development and degradation, are conditioned by a measure that carries meaning. But in European culture, Herman Hesse, his work, is the lot of the so-called intellectual elite. And the common people and the cattle do not even suspect these words, which in general correctly characterize the essence of music, its possibilities and place in culture, and most importantly, in politics. But these are general words, while concretics, well, these are already concretics. But nevertheless, this is indeed a very significant topic in the aspect of the quality of life and in the aspect of politics.
This is the concretics of Western life, because if we trace the development or degradation of European music of 20th century, I mean popular music now, then all popular European music is music that forms the animal principle. This is dark music.
Музыка европейская, популярная музыка, это музыка, которая формирует или сказать, животное начало. То есть это
It doesn't form, it excites.
Yes, that's right. It excites the animal principle. These are those very African rhythms. This is what you called it, rock music. There is, in essence, this is of course only an animal principle.
There are Overton windows there too. So, for example, from the works of the Rolling Stones, from Angie and everything else, we get pulled in by Angie, we relax, we wake up a drug addict monkey.
By the way, here is an interesting point. Here in Germany, I don't know how it is in other cities, but in Germany, there is a division of music related to paying a musician. A division of music into serious music, ernste Musik, and Unterhaltungsmusik. Well, let's call it popular music. So, serious music is all classical music without exceptions. These are orchestrations, these are arrangements, and so on. Popular music is everything else. It's jazz, it's pop music, it's estrada, it's rock, and so on. Initially, the musician has an idea at the level of some financial force already. Where is it better for him to go, or where his parents would like to send him? To earn money on serious music, or flounder as best you can, and do what you want in the liberal, in all this medley of colors, this variegation, and survive as you can.
In boundless diversity, in which development and degradation are merged into one. In general, if, after all, to speak in Russian, then the Russian language also has the ancient word blyat. Now it is taboo. Initially, it denoted the absence of any moral, nravious principle as a principle of life. Therefore, liberalism in Russian is characterized by two words: boundless блядство. That's it.
So, rock musicians, by the way, they very often confess later in the 2000s, wrote memoirs about their adventures in the 80s and 90s. Many went into sects, many became devout.
80-е годы и в 90-е годы многие ушли в секты, многие стали набожными.
They went to atone for sins.
Went to atone for sins. Even Pyotr Mamonov is considered one of such leaders of such a spiritual movement.
Лидеров, что ли, вот такого духовного движения, скажем.
If we talk about him, then he really did understand a lot of things. I perceive his repentance as sincere repentance, and not as a show.
Это да.
There is another interesting topic of folk music, such an interesting phenomenon when people start to study other cultures.
Интересный такой феномен, когда люди
When they start playing the music of other cultures, they try to imitate.
другие культуры, когда
There are a lot
начинают
of examples of how people are fond of Indian music, master Indian instruments that, in my mind, are very complex.
с тем, как увлекаются индийской
But
музыкой,
Indian music
осваивают
itself is, in my
индийские
opinion,
инструменты, которые,
very
на мой
primitive.
взгляд, очень сложные.
Although there are a lot of masters
Сама по
who
себе
master the
индийская
instruments
музыка,
and so on.
это, ну, на мой взгляд, очень примитивная, хотя очень много есть мастеров, которые владеют инструментом и так далее.
In my understanding, music and genetics are connected, because chromosomes are actually oscillatory systems, that is, antennas that transmit and receive. And accordingly, there are some cascades of re-emitters in the organism, which generally give rise to a certain national musical culture. If we talk about the music of India, then I suspect that much of it is the legacy of a past civilization. And it would be wrong to say that it is primitive. It is different. It is qualitatively different. But due to the fact that the past civilization reached a dead end and collapsed, and India, as its in many aspects successor, could not get out of that dead end, then Indian music should be treated with caution, accepting it for information, but not becoming its fan and slave. There is only one more question that we have not touched on. This is the art of opera. In general, many people perceive opera as extremely out of touch with life. Indeed, in real life, people talk, they don't sing. And in the opera, music leads the whole stage action. But in real life, it seems that there is no music at all. And so, opera is something so unnatural. But in reality, it is the other way around. Opera is the most lively art. We simply do not hear all the music of creation. And there are studies where they recorded oscillations in other frequency ranges, but then transferred them to the acoustic range, and in general a certain music of nature was obtained. That is, nature generates a certain music. We don't hear this music, but this music leads the whole life, precisely as oscillations, re-emission of oscillations. Therefore, the art of opera is perhaps the most realistic art, although not everyone understands this. The second side of the question consists in the fact that far from every composer is able to find an author librettist, then, together with him, generate music that will be part of a life-consistent opera. In my view, this conditions also the fact that the 20th century, and in the 21st century too, operatic art is mainly canned classics of the past. Well, the same goes for ballet. And the fact that opera is not in demand and is degrading as a branch of culture of our civilization and first of all the European one, because, well, in general, when operas were written to order, in many ways they were written really like hackwork to order. That is, technically, competently, but not lively, not a masterpiece. This was the beginning of the degradation of operatic art and of the creativity of composers in the genre of opera. In Russian culture, in my opinion, the most is the legend of the Invisible City of Kitezh. This is the highest literature, both in the aspect of the culture of speech and meanings, both by announcement and by default. Vladimir Ivanovich Belsky is an unrecognized genius of Russian literature, and Rimsky-Korsakov, who created the music for this work, this is indeed the pinnacle that modern musicians have to grow and grow in order to surpass.
Mikhail Viktorovich, I'm very glad that we met again and talked about music and culture.
Well, in conclusion, I will remind you of Čiurlionis. He was an outstanding musician and an outstanding artist. But this is not the naturalism that is obvious and understandable. But this is painting in music about those aspects of life that in the vast majority of cases are not available to the perception of our sight, touch, hearing.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We will do it again.